And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 78. Connor, 78. Guess who was number 78?
I don't know, Evan.
Nobody. Nobody was ever number 78. I feel like if I was a player coming in and I was like a rookie and you know how rookies get the bad numbers, I would totally want a number that no one had
That no
ever
one's had
had.
before. Just to
Yeah.
have it, was it Hockey Reference? It has like the list of
Yep.
everyone's different jerseys. Just to have that so you can check it off the list. You want to be
Yeah.
lost, even if you're a dude who's up for like three full games in the NHL, just to get your name at the top of the list. Just pick a
Like
number
if
like that.
like if I'm Jeremy Swayman and I'm coming up for just a little while, we'll get to in a bit. I'm not picking one. I'm picking 78 or any of the
Yeah.
other numbers that haven't been picked. But at any rate, we'll get into that later. But I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Connor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing fantastic. We are in the middle of a back-to-back. For us, people talk about back-to-back for players. How about back-to-back for the reporters and the people who cover the team and the media people? Oh
Woe
my
is
god.
us, right, Evan?
Oh
Such a
man,
such a grind to watch hockey all day.
it's tough. I had to roll out the legs today. It was a lot. It was a lot. By the way, no Kodak last night. Kodak Black was not at the Bruins. So we know. I maybe,
They're saving him to be a fan banner captain. I don't know if the cat's out of the bag there, if they were holding that for a
ooh.
surprise, but if you see him there in the playoffs, you heard it here first.
We're gonna be getting a email from the team being like, "Why'd you let that out so soon?" Supposed to be we were sitting on that one. We were gonna announce it later. Maybe Kodak was there, but he got more secretive with his location because
That'd be
his
a pretty
obviously
smart move, actually. You would think he'd be a little bit more discreet going
yes.
forward, but who knows? I mean, hey, good publicity for the NHL. The NHL had probably their most engaged day on social media probably in years. So
Yes. Oh, 100%.
shout
And
out
with the
Kodak Black.
Panthers. And the
Yeah,
Panthers. It's a small market team. Why the hell not? Like good publicity for them. The best
good for
part was
them.
The NHL tweeted like, "Oh, welcome happy to have you, Kodak." They deleted it. Like, leave it up. Come on, leave it up.
Just a wonderful day. Just a wonderful day for the league.
Let the replies flow. So speaking of replies that are going to be quite toxic, we are recording this again Thursday afternoon. So Tuukka Rask, by the time you are listening, Tuukka Rask has already played. We'll talk expectations more big picture, so it's not like we're gonna guess how he does last night. But Rask starts his first game since June of 2021 against the Flyers. Now, I've said this all along, and I know you've said this as well. A lot of people have said this. It's going to be a cesspool when he lets in that first goal because it will be. But the expectations for Rask for this game, so people can measure up our expectations against how he actually did. And what are your expectations for him going forward past just Thursday night?
Yeah, I think one, it's good to note that yeah, we're recording this before Tuukka Rask plays, but regardless of how he plays against the Flyers, he can either have a shutout or we can let up 4 goals and people will be pissed. I'm not putting a lot of focus on this one game because I have to imagine there's going to be some rust there. The Bruins would have liked for him to play a game in Providence or two. Didn't happen, so it's good to have the measured take ahead of time before even this game starts so that there could be some rust there. I know that's not going to make a difference to Bruins fans if he lets up 2, 3 goals to the Flyers, but just to have that out there in case people are mad that regardless of what happens tonight, we don't have the pod. Take it easy. It's going to be one game. That being said, going forward, it all depends on what kind of player you're getting in Rask. I mean, you listen to him; he seems to be being very positive that he's not dealing with any pain or any issues, and he feels like he's 100%, which is great because, I mean, if he's the same player he was the last couple of years, that's a huge boost for the Bruins, right? Like, I mean, there's not really any risk to bring him back, especially when you look at the money involved. I mean, what $1 million cap hit ends up being about I think 545,000 like in total salary. So no risk at all for a guy that if he's back the way he was, is what top 10 goalie, maybe top five. Like you add him to that mix, and again, as people have said, the main issue with this Bruins team, even if they're playing well right now, hasn't necessarily been the goaltending. But I think Bruce Cassidy kind of summed it up pretty well. I think when Rask first signed that PTO, it's like they're a top 10 team in goaltending right now. You bring Rask in, you could be top five. Like you've got already a strength of this team that can get even better with a guy in Rask who, again, when you factor in his contract plus the returns you could get from the guy, it makes it a no-brainer to sign him and bring him back into the fold. So, you look earlier this year, and even when the Bruins were, still doing pretty well, and as the year went on, Swayman and Olmark were finding their game. But look at how many of those, early on games where they're coming up short, 3-2, 2-1, where you needed like just that extra say that could have changed the momentum, would have given you maybe at the very least another point in the standings. Having a guy like Rask back in the fold can only help in that regard in terms of, eking out some of these wins, especially once you get to tougher matchups, against, teams that you're going to face down the road in the playoffs. Like you need an extra, spot somewhere across the roster. And if Rask is one of those guys, especially for sign for pennies on the dollar, it's a no brainer.
What do you need on the roster? What was that? A spark?
A spark, Evan. Spark.
Spark. But yes, I agree with you, and this is why I think again, you're getting Rask back for $1 million, right? He could have not gotten the surgery. He
Yeah.
could have not gotten this surgery, which has now made him feel great again, right? Like he could have not done this. He could have rested and just said, "I'm going to come back," or he could have not come back. He could have, and I think it's funny to me when you get an elite goalie like this who put his money where his mouth was, where he all along has said, money does not matter to me. And there are even times when I thought maybe it'll be like 3 million. I
Two and a
wouldn't blame him
half.
for
Like,
asking. Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Like the dude deserves it, but he got a million. It's like Detective Crashmore who's like, I do one appearance to get another 2 mil. That's what this is like. But I do find it hilarious when people, are like, and we'll get into Swayman in a bit, but with Olmark, they'll say, well, if Olmark signed all this money, uh, when's Olmark going to play? Isn't Olmark going to be mad? And I keep thinking to myself, didn't Rask split the net with Halak for the past like 3 years?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like this is not Rask's net.
It
It's the
hasn't, yeah.
split.
It hasn't been like a 70-30 split. It's been what? Like 55-60, maybe we'll say 60-40, if that. And again,
Yeah,
you're getting
at
two guys
most.
now that are what, counting for 6 million against the cap when what, in previous years it was what, 9.5, 10 million. So you're saving money and having Rask back who's potentially healthy, and Olmark, who I'm sure we're going to talk about in a minute, playing pretty well as well. Like you've got a pretty good situation right now. And worst case scenario, if Rask isn't the same player he was, and he takes a step back, which would be unfortunate for the Bruins, you have another contingency plan in place, right? Like, we're gonna do a deep dive, I think, on Swayman in a minute, but just you look at just the low risk, high reward, angle of bringing Rask back. I don't see any risk at all, and especially for a guy that, if he's the same player he was, is going to help tremendously, especially with the way the Bruins are playing right now.
This was kind of almost like what we thought they should have done with Chara towards the end. Now, granted, Chara fell off a cliff, so that's
Yes.
completely different. But I do think when after the 1920 season, we all kind of said, why, with the Capitals, it was like 1 year, $800,000 deal. It was like veterans minimum,
Yeah.
and we were all like, why wouldn't you do that? Like the money doesn't matter, just like
Yeah.
have them there. Um, Obviously the game fell off, and that would have been a guy who you would have said, like he's that's money that we can kind of cross off the books, I guess, but it's not that much. But with Rask, I think the good expectation is he splits the net, puts up similar numbers to years past. You take it. What's wrong with that? Like that's way more guaranteed than you would what you would have got with Swayman. Now, again, I think the world of Swayman. I think he's great. When they needed him this year, he was great. But he's a young guy, and we're going to get into that now. Where the big thing with Rask is a lot of people have now realized, well, a million isn't that much. What can we find the issue in here? And it is come down to they're ruining Swayman's development. He's gonna revolt against Don Sweeney and the Bruins and go crazy and do what Tuukka Rask did with milk crates, but like in Sweeney's office. He takes like, a binder full of papers and just like throwing them everywhere and stuff. But you noted this, I think, on Twitter, or you noted this to me and Ty. I forget when you said this. But how many times was Rask brought up between Providence and Boston back in the
10
day?
times. 10 times
10
between
times.
'07 and '09.
Yeah.
10 times.
So that's the thing. This isn't going to hurt his development. It might actually help it because he's going down to Providence. He's going to play consistently. He's not even playing consistently up here. What do you think of this whole Swayman stuff?
I mean, like, again, if you want to like sum it up, yes, it's an unfortunate situation because, Swayman, all things considered, can he work on his game down in Providence? Yes, of course. Will he make the most of his top, his number one reps in Providence? Yes. All things considered, it's still unfortunate for a guy that even as a younger player, has shown very good returns. Like, I still think he has exceeded, I think, everyone's expectations in terms of not
Oh
really
yeah.
having, even though he's had rebound issues, he's had a few tough games. It's not like it's been a snowballing issue for him up in the NHL. Like, he's going to be a very promising player. So it stinks for him, right? Like, obviously, this is a very unique situation with Rask coming back, Olmark, in net as well. What are you going to do about it? But like the notion that sending him down is now going to like torpedo his confidence and he's going to request a trade, like that sentiment is some soft ass thinking. I think when you like just look at just the grand scheme of things, like is it unfortunate? Yeah, of course. But one, they've mapped it out, back in October, September, pretty much for these guys. And again, it's one thing to hear that in October, and then another thing to actually get sent down to Providence in January. But you like look at Swayman's whole trajectory right now, like how many guys, unless you are like the chosen one of a prime like net minding prospect, how often do you just go right up to the NHL as a true rookie and kind of just stay there like permanently? Doesn't happen all that
It
much.
seems like Spencer Knight's doing that,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Is he
about
the only
it.
one?
And,
He's the only
even
one.
pretty much, right? And that's another situation where also like it was forced because Bobrovsky for his first 2 years was dog shit for Florida too. Like there's also
Terrible.
that, right? Like, Swayman lands up here because also don't forget Rask had like hip surgery. Like he was out for the whole year. You don't know if he was even going to come back. So if you're Swayman, I just look at like you project the road to the NHL that so many of these goalies face. And again, we'll use Rask as, exhibit A, like 10 times back and forth between Boston and Providence over a 2 year span. Finally gets up, has a great, I guess, official rookie year, right, in 2010, and then is a backup for another 2 years, right? Like, and again, worked out pretty well with Tim Thomas, but all things considered, it's been far from a linear path for a guy that has had a pretty good career, I would say, in Tuukka Rask, right? Like, that's not an outlier in terms of these guys kind of zigzagging between the AHL and NHL before settling into a role. So, if Jeremy Swayman's path over like a 2-3 year span is this arduous path of 9 games in Providence before starting 10 games as a true rookie, starting the year getting opening night and like 20 plus games in Boston his second year, and then getting 2-3 months of Providence. Not also factoring in that he's probably going to get another game or two up here, I'd imagine, be it through the schedule, injuries, rest, anything like that. Like, I don't think he's going to just be banished down to Providence for the rest of the year. So those are his first 2 seasons as a pro. Pretty good. And who knows what happens next year, right? Like, Tuukka Rask very well may not be back. This could very well be like a farewell. He hasn't said about what his future is, but I mean, comes back, rides it out with his, usual, crew of teammates for one more year. Could happen. Like, we very well could be in a situation where Swayman, 3 years into his pro career now, is given the full time role with Olmark going forward, which, considering what we've seen from Swayman and his promise, plus with Olmark, what we've seen from a guy that's 7-1 since December, 926 save percentage, it's a good situation. Like, as complicated as it is, and I think we've talked about this multiple times, that the Bruins goaltending is, you feel like Charlie from Always Sunny with like the big like
The
billboard. That's how it
board.
is. Yeah, that's how it feels when you're mapping it out. But I think the more you process it and just look at Swayman's development, his progression, I'm sure he would have loved to be up in the NHL. Like, no shit, which rookie wouldn't want to like stay up there permanently and only play 9 games in Providence? Of course. But when you look at just the situation you have now, where you have Rask back for cheap, Allmark's finding, his game and is playing very well, and Swayman still gets a lot of NHL reps, and at the worst case, spends another month or two in Providence when plenty of other talented goalies have spent much longer in the minors. It seems like a win-win, right?
Yeah, and again, goaltenders' paths, as you said, to the NHL are wild. I mean, look at Tim Thomas. Like Thomas had the wildest path to the NHL. Dude wasn't in his prime until he was like mid to late 30s. So again, I think people, I think people kind of want to find an issue with this. And I get it, right? Like it's tough to tell a kid, "Hey, you're going back down to Providence," right? Like the idea of that losing, like he didn't lose his job really because he's the only one who could go down.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it does kind of suck for him. But I think long term, he's the guy, and Sweeney said that. Like, that's the dude. That's the guy going forward. It doesn't have to be now, right? You have Olmark signed. You have Rask for this year, which again, I feel like he's on a Bergeron type deal where it's like go year to year. We'll see what happens at the end of the year with Rask. Wouldn't be surprised if Bergeron left, if Rask left too, just because like it'd be like, oh,
Little
I don't really
farewell
feel like.
tour.
Yeah, they can do like what JS. I don't know if you remember this when Teemu Solani had his final game in Anaheim. He went around the ice because J.S. Shigeru was the goalie for the Avs, and they like held
Mhm.
hands up in the air. Maybe they'll do that around the Garden Ice.
That'd be beautiful.
Be romantic.
I'm sure a lot of Bruins fans would be freaking out if that actually happened. But I feel like Bruins fans, when that day finally comes, it's not going to be like down the road. It'll be all like sentimental, watching like the highlights. But in the moment, everyone would be like, "We're so fucked." Like that's like all of the main
It's
reaction
like
would
the
actually be.
Chef Boyer "we fucked" meme. That's what it's
Yes,
gonna be like.
yes,
People are gonna
exactly.
be chucking themselves out of the balcony. Anyways, one game is starting big for the fourth line right now, and that is the fourth line of Nosek, Bleed, and Curtis Lazar. Curtis Lazar, I mentioned this to you last night on the Bruins Rinkside thing, has 6 points in his since the beginning of January. Dude's just like low key putting up numbers. Um,
Just snagging Urho Vakanainen's goal too, which is really unfortunate. Like it's so cruel the NHL just can completely change it because like if it was up to Lazar, he would clearly give it to the rookie for his first career goal. But no,
yes.
sorry, Urho, out.
See you, buddy. Well,
Yeah.
Pete Blackburn tweeted something like when he first scored, he was like, "Oh, we're still waiting for Urho to score his first goal against a real NHL team."
Hey.
But
Yeah. That,
zing.
well, lost in the shuffle. That Montreal team is butt. That's bad. Holy crap.
Shitty
Holy
team.
crap.
And that goes deeper than just like missing Price and Shea Weber. That's like way. I mean, they've got
That's a
real issues.
that's a bootleg squad.
And what's funny is that is a team that in my lifetime, so 22 years, has never ever invested in a center. Like they have never had depth down the middle. I find that hilarious because you can go to every Stanley Cup winning team. Almost all of them had at least a legit number one center. A lot had a also very legit number two center. Right? They don't have a number. I mean, who was the best center in our lifetime with them? Saku Koivu?
It might be like
Like that would be the best. That's the one. And they boot him out of there too? There was
yeah.
something terrible
That's
with him.
Yeah, no, the fact, I mean, what is Shane Wright's a center, right? So we'll see what happens
Yeah,
there.
maybe that's the guy. Because they
It's
also
gonna
have
be
Nick Suzuki.
it's gonna be like the '85 NBA draft where they say like the NBA rigged it so the Knicks would get Patrick Ewing. It's like, oh, oh, whoops, that's what's gonna
He's in
happen.
Montreal. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can't wait. Montreal, yeah, that'll be fun. He'll be in a terrible situation. Because I think Suzuki could be a legit second line center
oh
someday.
yeah.
Um, Someone just drove down our driveway, a big like van. Maybe I'm getting killed in a
There's the
second.
Montreal police. They
they're
get you.
coming, they're, coming,
There you were
they're,
slandering them.
they're responding to the 2011 call with Chara.
Yes.
But anyways, fourth line is doing great. Feels like the fourth line started to take shape, which again, when you want to make a real playoff push, you need that legitimate fourth line. And that was kind of the goal because the fourth line of Corrali, Wagner, and rotating cast on the left side, Nordstrom, Achari, whomever, kind of dried up a bit. Now it feels like a new fourth line's time to take in shape.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the biggest surprise has to be Bleed, right? Like you knew Lazar was going to be in the mix. Nosek, pretty much you were going to pencil him in at 4C, barring any other, major steps forward from a guy like Frederick, what have you. But for Bleed to be, I think over the years, Bleed has been as advertised in terms of a north-south guy, physical. You know what you're going to get, but in terms of offensive production, you know, he's a guy like the stat line at the end of the year up in the NHL was like 21 games, like 1 goal, 3 assists. You're like, all right, like that's about right. The fact that now he's got what 8 points in 16 games, and like he's making the most of his opportunities there. So, we kind of touched on this last night after the Bruins win over Montreal, but when Frederick comes back, like where exactly does he kind of slot into the mix? Who knows maybe what happens with DeBrusque, but in terms of just that fourth line, are you moving Bleed out of the lineup because he's playing well and he's, finishing chances. He's active on the forecheck. He's getting pucks into grade A ice where you've got guys like Lazar crashing the net. Nosek's a skilled playmaker. Like you've got pieces in place there that are all contributing. It's not like they're again reinventing the wheel or doing anything different. It's all just hard forecheck, net front presence, all those things. And, finally, I think as we've seen across the lineup, you also just have puck luck going the Bruins' way. They're getting pucks on net. Goals that were maybe stopped or clanged off a crossbar, what have you, are now sailing in at a crazy pace, which is, again, regressing, back to the mean for this team. But when you look at that fourth line, though, if they can start building some semblance of consistency there and, multiple guys have stepped up, but if, Bleed, Nosek, and Lazar are playing like this, I don't see how you're moving them out of the lineup right now because as much as people maybe talk about a guy like Oscar Steen, who's been very good on that third line, Bleed's been right up there in terms of a surprise. Like, if you told me he was on pace for like over a 82 game span of like 40 points, no, no, I would say you're crazy. And again, I don't think he's going to do that. But like, if he becomes like, it's kind of what we talked about with Frederick in terms of setting expectations for him. Like, you're not looking for him to be like a 30-point guy at this point. Like, you would take it if he's in the lineup. But if he just gives you 18 to 22 points a season while playing that physical game, you'd be more than happy with what he'd bring on that fourth line. And right now, Bleed's kind of the guy doing it. So you have to be really happy with how that fourth line's gelling right now, with so many moving parts, especially.
This will blow people's minds because I didn't realize this. Do you know how long Anton Bleed has been around for? He's been here since 2016-17.
He's
Like,
gonna be he's gonna be like 27 in like 2 months.
yep, he's 26 right now. That dude has been around forever. And it's because, again, I mean, 2017-18, he played a game. 18-19 played one game. 19-20 played seven. Last year played 10. So he's starting to find his rhythm. But he's been around for like low key ever. And he played 19 games in 16-17. That lineup, though, obviously was spread pretty thin. It's funny. You mentioned the bounces. And I have a group chat of friends who are all very negative on the Bruins. And someone said, the Bruins haven't lost since like the beginning of January. And one of them goes, well, they're just getting a lot of bounces. And I'm like, well, yeah,
That's how
that's
it works.
hockey. Isn't that wild? Like, they didn't get a lot of bounces before and they were losing. And now they're winning and they're getting a lot of bounces. It's funny how that kind of works. Everything
Yeah,
kind of evens out. It's wild.
it's kind of part of the formula.
Isn't that wild? I just have no idea. It's kind of new information to me, I guess. But yes, fourth line's starting to work. And I think the bottom six as a whole is kind of coming together. Coyle and Steen seem to work together well. The left side's kind of up in the air because DeBrusk is getting dealt at some point. Foligno, we still don't really know what his deal is. That hasn't been talked about yet, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Sweeney
no.
just in a little.
So Cassidy said that they think it's more of a short term thing than a long
Oh,
term thing.
wow.
That he'll be out this whole week, but they said like could be up in the air that he might be available next week. So I mean, when that first happened, you thought what like ACL,
Oh,
broken
easily.
ankle, something like that. So the fact that Cassidy mentioned on Wednesday that Foligno skated earlier that morning, was walking on it. So not this week, but the fact that he's even, if you told me he'd be available in like February, I'd view that as a victory in terms of just having him back out there. So the fact that he could be around um, by next week, at the earliest, good news for the Bruins.
Yeah, that's definitely not a bad thing. Still, though, even with Foligno back, feels like they're missing a piece or two, right? Like the feeling of even though Eric Hollow was just getting mad at everybody on Wednesday night. I mean, granted, he got
How
headbutted, but
dare
like
he
I'd
get
be
headbutted? Yeah. How dare he get irate?
I'd be pretty pissed too. Um, Still feels like they need a second line center and they need to shore up the thing, something on defense. Because again, John Moore feels like could be out a little while. We're kind of getting a sense that might be a concussion,
Yeah.
just given. Someone tweeted it, the video of his head that kind of slamming against the glass
Yeah.
from that dude Pizzetta.
Bootleg Eichel.
Yeah, so someone named Pizzetta. But still feels like they're going to have to add a defenseman and a second line center. Where would you put the most assets? Would you put the most assets into a second line center, or would you, or would in on the side get like a depth defenseman, or would you do the reverse and try to go for a top four defenseman and then get a depth forward?
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I would say probably in terms of
Because they don't have
you
the
know
assets for both.
Yeah, exactly. You can't get like, Hurdle and like, Chutrin or one of those guys, right? Like you can't,
Oh,
but
easily.
yeah, yeah, of course. I don't think even on like NHL, like BGM mode, you could do that. But I feel like in terms of like, killing two birds with one stone, the best route is like putting most of your assets in to get like a 2C and then like getting a depth guy on defense just because, I think they do need a body out there on defense, but you know, you look at where they're going to be in rougher shape when you get to the playoffs. Like I think the big takeaway from this current win streak, and it's great they're getting on a roll and they're playing well, but you hope that doesn't just like mask like the underlying issues as well. Like I think Eric Hall has been very good at 2C, especially with Hall and Pasternak. It's worked out. Their styles of play work out great, but just because like they're fitting right now doesn't mean that it's like all right. Well, we don't need to yeah, Thomas Hurdle, go to Toronto or have Florida pick him up or something like that. Like you don't want to like then just put your foot off the gas just because it's working right now. And I think if you add another 2C, it just makes your lineup that much, more effective in terms of just the trickle down effect there, especially if, you know, it's a Hurdle or a Miller or what have you with Hall and Posser. I mean, you put even like a guy who's a tier below those guys with those two, and you're going to do pretty well. So, um, I also think when you factor in just, the amount of guys you could acquire that could fit in at 2C, whether it's like Hurdle, JT Miller, those guys. Whereas for defense, it's like, all right, well, I don't know if Hampus Lindholm's getting moved now with Anaheim, where they're kind of building something right now, and he's still like 27, 28. Um, you know, Obviously guys like Ekholm signed, long term deals, so he's off the board, and Nashville's red hot. And again, like I just don't know if you have the assets to like win the chicken like sweepstakes, right? Like you for what that guy is signed to for his age, I just don't think you have the means to beat, I don't know, the Kings or the Ducks or something like that. Like I just don't think you are even able to get in that table to get a guy like that. So my hunch would be they still have to look at upgrading at 2C and then adding a depth piece kind of further down the lineup on defense just to shore it up. But again, a lot can change between now and then. Like, uh, you still have to just be like, pragmatic with the fact that even though the team's rolling right now, you still are, I think, another piece or two away from being viewed as like a legit contender. Like they're cruising right now. You should be excited about the way they're playing. Everything seems to be falling into place, but still need something that gets you over the top, especially if you want to make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, because this could still be a streak. Your secondary scoring could completely dry up over the next 10 games, even. Who's the one 2C potentially that you didn't mention? And I don't know if he's really on the block, but his name kind of gets tossed around from time to time. He was here technically last night. Claude Giroux. Interesting case, right? He's a free agent after this year. Currently carries a cap hit of 8.275 million, which is not exactly fun to deal with.
Hmm.
Um, but it's interesting. The Flyers are a weird team because we talked about the
Yeah.
Canadians over our lifetime. It feels like the Flyers have always had a good roster the past 10 to 15 years, and they have consistently underachieved. The one year they overachieved, they went to the Cup, and that no one expected that. But ever since, like they've had good lineups, and I mean, obviously in net they had issues, but like the fact that Giroux and Voracek and Couturier
Couturier. Yeah.
haven't found a way to in Atkinson now to well, Atkinson doesn't really count because he's just this year, but like they haven't found a way to get to that next level is interesting. And I do wonder if Giroux would be a guy. Because I mean he has 29 points in 32 games this year. He's not coming cheap. That is going to cost money. I don't know. That's an interesting one. Because you would get production. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
imagine a line of Hall, Giroux, Pasternak. Like it'd be
Pretty good.
absurd.
Yeah, not bad.
But you'd have to think a first round pick would be in there,
You got to
and
make the
most
money work.
likely.
I
Oh, that's
think I
right.
think I think the biggest hurdle for that is just money. That's why like even hurdle would be a challenge. That's why like honestly JT Miller, you probably have to give up more because he's under contract, but he's what 5.25 like. But again,
Yeah.
who knows? Like they also need Vancouver to start slowing down. Like I still don't think that team's making the playoffs because they dug themselves such a big hole. But still, you need to have them. The optics aren't great if they're winning 14 of 16 and then they finally blow things up because they were so bad and were so inactive to start the year. So we'll see what happens between them or the Flyers, where Flyers who think they would just blow it all up, but also they're in that weird awful stretch for optics wise where it's like, all right, we probably should have blown it up last year, and then Chuck Fletcher like dug themselves a bigger hole by like trading for Ristolainen and getting all these guys and
It's
overhauling
just
the roster, and
hilarious.
it just wasted a complete year of this team when they could have actually started that rebuild. So, we'll see what happens. It's kind of the same with like waiting out this DeBrusk trade of like the Bruins don't have a lot of leverage anyway. Might as well wait for teams to get desperate, whether it's the Flyers who have to feel the pressure to blow it up, whether it's Vancouver, whether it's Edmonton who is now, might be signing like a Vander Kane and dealing with those optics that are so trash otherwise. Like, you got so many other teams that are feeling the pressure that's only going to ramp up as we get closer to the deadline, which is still months away.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be interesting to see how it all pans out because there's plenty of teams that are either you know playing well right now that could take a step back, or teams that are already set on a rebuild. So there's gonna be a lot of guys out there just about what the price is and how the Bruins can make it work.
Yeah, I mean, Philly's lost 5 in a row, so I
Yeah, not
don't
great.
know if again, like, you're right about them setting themselves back. It is funny what teams will do to try to go for it. They think, "Oh, if we spend more, if we get these more established NHL players," it's like, no. It all comes back to drafting and development, which would have been important for this Philly team, but didn't really take shape. But anyways, that is today's episode of Poke the Bear. Connor, what can the people look forward to over at BSJ?
Yeah, of course, we will be covering all things related to the guy in net for the Bruins that played on Thursday, looking at that situation in net of how it maps out going forward, maybe what the future holds for that goalie core. And then again, it's a hectic kind of stretch going through the next, week plus now, and I feel like that's going to be the case for the rest of the season. So we'll have all latest updates, game reports, all that good stuff for BSJ over the next couple of weeks. So subscribe at bostonsportsjournal.com. Want to follow me on Twitter? You can do that at ConorRyan_93. And on TikTok at by Conor Ryan with one N.
There you go. One N. There you go. Perfect. All right, that is today's episode of Poke the Bear. That's Connor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky.